English 9 students. So this is a lesson about you composing your draft this week. So the only thing you're really doing this week is we're going to talk about presentation skills, which is the next video you'll watch after this one, and how to start composing my draft now, which is what you're going to be working on all week. So let me change my screen. Okay, so script writing, right? So now you are actually going to start composing a draft, and this is just a rough draft. Next week, we'll talk about how you're actually going to create the speech and what format, but right now I need you just to worry about the script writing. So your learning target today is students will compose draft 1 of their Ignite script. So you're going to compose your first draft of your script this week. You are going to use your research question and notes to compose the draft of your Ignite script. So in order to write this script, you're going to use the research notes and questions that you developed last week, and that's how you're going to compose your draft. So the requirements for this speech is that it must be 5 minutes. We talked about this in the first week. Account for some time lost. I'm going to actually explain that next week, so don't panic. If you feel like you time your script after you write your draft and you're like, it's only 4 minutes and 35 seconds, you're going to be okay. Trust me, you do need to account for some lost time. We'll talk about that next week. You must have 20 slides, 15 seconds per slide. That we're going to talk about next week. You know, how do I start developing the slides? We got to get the script first. You can't work on the slides yet, so we'll start that next Monday. And then your speech must have concrete introduction, body, and conclusion, about 500 words. So the speech is going to be about. Don't freak out and panic if it's not exactly 500 or it's a little bit over. I'm giving you an estimated number that it's around there somewhere. And I'm going to actually let you see next week. Or maybe this week I'll post some student examples from the past speeches. So parts of your presentation, like how do I start this draft? Well, you need to know the parts of your presentation, okay? So one, it needs an introduction, right? You're not just gonna come out and say, you know, just your name and what your speech is. You need to have some type of hook, just like you would in a paper. If you're giving a speech, a hook, an introduction to what you're going to talk about is even more important, right? If you're going to be publicly speaking in front of people, you want to grab their attention because you want them to listen to your speech all the way through. Body, sorry guys, I have to move my arm. It was in a bad position. Body paragraph. So the body is the body of the presentation. It's all the meat, just like in a paper, right? So you introduce me to the topic, you get me kind of intrigued. I'm like, all right, I want to keep listening. And then you get into the meat of the information of the speech. And then there's a conclusion, right? You got to wrap that speech up. So let's talk about the introduction. The introduction, the purpose is to generate interest, right? So kind of like I was saying, you know, you're probably going to use something to try to generate that interest so that they listen all the way through. And use your knowledge that you have about, well, how do I write papers when you go to write this script? 500 words is maybe going to be a full page. That's it. You're not going to have really more than that. But generate, the purpose of the introduction is you want to get their attention. Body paragraph, right? Or I shouldn't be saying paragraph. The body of the speech. The purpose is answer the research questions through your research and your thinking, right? Like, what is it that you want to talk about in terms of your topic? Like, how are you trying to focus your topic? And this is the meat of your speech. This is where, like, I get to hear all about lucid dreaming or wildfires, what specifically you want to talk about in terms of the wildfires, or I'm trying to think of more topics. I'm having a hard time thinking, you guys, the last couple days. And so, like, this is where, like, I'm like, all right, where's the meat here, right? What's the really good deep information that I'm going to be able to take away and say, wow, I'm really enlightened by that. Like, it's not something that I thought about until you brought it up and gave me this information. And then the conclusion. Conclusions can be really short in the speech. You know, what's the moral of the speech? Ask yourself that. You know, the conclusion of the speech should include the closing thoughts about your research question, but also should include some reflection or analysis of the significance of the event to the speaker, right? What lesson did you learn? How has what happened to you affected your life now? So like, what kind of is the moral of everything that you were talking about? Like, what do you want me to leave your speech like thinking about and being intrigued? Like, you know, for example, I don't know if you guys have ever watched documentaries. Documentaries do conclusions like this really well. We just watched one last night called The Social Dilemma on Netflix, which talks all about technology and social media and how it has completely twisted and turned society. And the way they ended that was with like these rhetorical questions for the audience, right? And I left watching that documentary thinking about it for hours. Thinking about the purpose, thinking about how I want to make my own changes in my own life that are not healthy, you know, based on like all of this stuff that they talked about that I knew, but I guess I just never thought about enough. And so like, you know, documentaries do a really good job with that, where they leave the audience like leaving being like, I want to keep thinking about this. Like, that's how you want to end your speech. So you wrap up your points very briefly, a reminder of what your topic is, and lasting thoughts. You give these lasting thoughts to the audience, whether it is a moral of what you say the speech is about, or you leave a rhetorical question for the audience. But in the end, you're really trying to get, you know, the audience thinking about what it is that you have talked about for 5 minutes.